Ohio State couldn't find the knockout. Now it heads into the second half of the season with their championship hopes in doubt again. That is Zach Boren over there. I am Austin Ward. This is the Podcast Daily. It's a Monday. It's a Boren Blitz. Hey, it was an entertaining football game on Saturday night at Autzen Stadium. 32-31, lived up to the top three billing. Oregon definitely have to start by giving them more credit than I did going into the game. They're a heck of a football team. I think Ohio State still is too, but they have some serious questions to answer coming out of that loss, 32-31. Zach, had a little bit of time to recover. How are you feeling about what happened against the Ducks?
First off, you have to give credit to Oregon from what the product that they've put out so far this year compared to what they put out against Ohio State Saturday night. Their big-time players came out to play in a big-time game. And they made the plays when they needed to be made. They stepped up to the challenge. So first off, kudos to them because to your point, I didn't give them that much credit going into this game. Did I think it was going to be a good matchup? Yes. But did I think Oregon would operate and make the plays the way they did? No. So kudos to them. Secondly, if you're Ohio State, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. There are a lot of glaring issues. And I'm not even going to say holes because I don't think there's holes on this team. There are issues within this team in this program that need to be addressed ASAP. And you and I have been talking about them for a long time. And it was a matter of time until it truly cost them in a big game. And it's cost them. And I would argue those things have cost them in the last couple of years. I would argue it cost them against Georgia. I would argue it cost them against Michigan the last in 22 and 23. And it cost them again Saturday night against Oregon. So there needs to be some coming to Jesus within that Woody Hayes facility. And it's on Ryan Day to do that.
Yeah. So when we start by giving Oregon credit, I think you have to do that. And they had a great atmosphere in their stadium. Their players answered the moment. But I still left on Saturday night thinking that Ohio State lost that game more than Oregon won it. I don't mean that as a criticism of Oregon. They are a very good team. But you have one really bad bounce that goes against Ohio State on the onside kick and Caleb Downs going in there. Ohio State said they prepared for that. Hey, sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way, but you have the turnover. We talked about that all week long. If Ohio State wins the turnover battle, they're going to beat Oregon. That flipped the game on its head. You were talking about it. We were texting back and forth when I could get service in the stadium. And it was like, after you go up 7-0, defense got an early stop. If you get up 2 scores, this game maybe looks completely different. Turnover, boom, Oregon gets right back in it. Couldn't turn the football over. But that's not even the issue. The offense came back. It battled through injuries. It scored 31 points on the road against a really good team. There's not a world in my mind where Ohio State should be losing games when it's scoring 30-plus points. And the Silver Bullets did not live up to that moniker on Saturday night. And I think that is why I view this more of the Buckeyes who had built this identity. But Jim Knowles is going to have the best defense in America statistically going into it. That's where they were. They collapsed, and I think it started on the defensive line.
Couldn't agree with you more. We are 100% on the same page. I think if you were to tell me that 2 of the starting 5 offensive linemen would have went down in the first half, and that this team still puts out 31 points, and at the very end is driving the ball down the field to win it, the finger should not be pointed at them. I think from looking at social media after the game, Will Howard is the one who kept us in this game. Like Will Howard, I think, had
100%
an amazing game. I mean, I would argue this was his best game as an Ohio State quarterback. I think he controlled the huddle, controlled the situation. I think he made the throws when he needed to make them. He did everything that he needed to do to win this game. It has to go to the defense. And we've talked about this time and time and time again. I just brought up Georgia in 22, Michigan in 22, brought up Michigan in 23. When the defense needs to make a big play, and it goes back, I don't know why so vividly, maybe because I was at the game last year and had a front row seat. late 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter in Ann Arbor, right? You have to make a play to go to the Big Ten championship game, and the defense could not get off the field. It takes me back to yesterday or Saturday, right?
Yeah.
When the defense had to make a play to win this game, they could not make it. And to your point, all night long, Dylan Gabriel had all time the entire night to throw. Like he, from watching the game, and I know maybe, PFF or whatever kind of stats are going to say that, there were more pressures than this. In my opinion, there were 2 pressures the entire night on Dylan Gabriel. 0 sacks, 2 pressures. Both of those pressures occurred when unblocked guys on the line of scrimmage got access to Dylan Gabriel. Sonny Styles once on a blitz. JTT once a defensive end because they had the backside pulling guard coming out to pass pro on him in pass pro off of play action, and he didn't get there. Those were the only 2 times. So you're telling me we got 2 pressures all night, and they were when guys were unblocked. Completely unacceptable. If you were telling me that, hey, these defensive players are saying that Silver Bullets are back and we're the best defense in the country, and you give up almost 500 yards in a game in a top 5 matchup, it's inexcusable. Inexcusable. As a defensive player, I remember we talked about this all the time with Coach Fickle. Defense always travels. Always. Right? They say offense sometimes in hostile environments, it's hard to get on the same page, hard to communicate, hard to do a lot of things. Defense always travels. You are staying true to who you are. Hell, when you go on the road, it's quiet, right? You're able to communicate. You're able to put yourself in the right position. And they were unable to do that all night long. And I'm not saying from a position standpoint. I'm just saying from a flat out make play standpoint. They failed to do that all night long. And to your point, I've been harping on it the past couple of weeks, and I'm sure there's some people on here that are going to say I'm completely wrong. But guess what? I feel pretty confident, in my opinion, that this starts with the defensive line and ends with the defensive line. If you get pressure on Dylan Gabriel, he's not throwing for 370 yards, 360, whatever it was. He is not throwing for that if you are in his face all night long and you weren't even seen by him.
Yeah. And I don't mean for this conversation for either one of us to absolve the coverage issues. And Denzel Burke, we saw him struggle repeatedly, and Oregon and Dylan Gabriel picked on him and they hit deep shots. But I think the reason that I go back to, and if people want to blame one more than the other and they think it was about the coverage more than the pass rush, that's fine. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. For me, it is watching this because it has become a repeated issue. You don't have the time for long developing routes and for someone to wind up running 40, 50 yards down the field for the deep shot. And Dylan Gabriel threw a great ball, but he was not pressured on those. That becomes easy money and, difficult for Denzel Burke or Davison Igbinosun or the safeties or anybody to handle those long developing routes if they're not. Jim Knowles says all the time, what pressure and coverage they work together. They work in tandem. They were not in sync last night. And that was why Oregon had opportunities to push the football down the field, because they had seemingly no concern whatsoever that Ohio State's pass rush was going to get home.
The Denzel Burke issue is completely separate from this, right? Were there issues last night? Yes. Why he wasn't subbed out for Jermaine Matthews for like a series as a reset, I don't know. Especially when you look at the defensive line and you have starters that are way more superior than the backups being subbed out down in the red zone by the defensive line coach, which makes zero sense whatsoever, right? If you think you've got 5 stars and studs and future first round draft picks at defensive line, why the hell are you subbing out for guys that aren't even 60% of that talent when you need to make a play? So the substitution thing, if the defensive line coach can do it, guess what? The secondary coach can do it as well. But that's a completely different situation here. It's when you give Dylan Gabriel, who is, Austin, you were there. I've heard from people maybe 5'10", maybe 5'11", right? Yeah. So when you're giving a guy who is that short in the pocket all time to throw, it's like 7-on-7. And I'll tell you right now, quarterbacks will feast on you when it's 7-on-7. If they don't feel any pressure in front of them, if they don't hear any noise around them, and what I say from noise is hands in the air in their face, right? Feeling pressure from their peripheral. Like if they have such a clean pocket where they're just able to sit there, go through their reads, and have 3-4 seconds every single passing play to throw, guess what? They're going to make the throws. And plus, it's Dylan Gabriel, who was a number one transfer quarterback this past year, right? Has thrown up massive numbers throughout his college career. Like, and I would also argue that though, and I'm not making an excuse for the secondary. They did not play, especially Denzel Burke, right? But when you have to put those guys on an island every single play, because the only way that you can try to get pressure is by bringing a blitz and bringing more than your front four, guess what? It singles those guys up. So if you're blitzing and you still have one-on-one matchups that you aren't winning, that then puts corners and these safeties in 4-second one-on-one matches when you're trying to cover wide receiver, makes it really challenging. Challenging.
Yeah, there's just, I don't think any question that the defensive line coming out of this second off date with Nebraska and then the road trip to Penn State, they're going to, Dylan Raiola and Drew Aller on deck. So you're going to have to put pressure on those quarterbacks coming forward. That can be maybe a conversation for a week from now. But offensively, we haven't had a good old-fashioned officiating controversy to talk about really this season, Zach. It wasn't offensive pass interference to me. I thought it was a normal hand-fighting situation, making contact within the first couple yards of the line of scrimmage. Jeremiah Smith is just a freakish human, and if you try to engage him physically, you're probably going to lose. He and Emeka Ibuka were also just getting absolutely mauled on some other routes previously on that drive, and the official's like, you know what, hey, let's let these guys play and settle it on the field. Then the most most influential, pivotal call of the game, play of the game, they throw the flag. And again, this is why Ryan Day said you don't want to leave it up to one play or one call because it can go against you. But, man, I did not think that was pass interference personally.
If you're going to let them play, you need to let them play. Like, it's pretty straightforward. If you are an official and you are going to let things slide, you have to let them slide all night long. That's what I hate about officiating, is that they will let stuff slide all night long, but then within the last 2 minutes of a game, when the ramifications are so much higher, they want to make those calls. If you look back at it, the DB is straight up on Jeremiah Smith and literally engages with him within 5 yards, right? He's at 5 yards and literally is engaging with Jeremiah Smith, trying to jam him at that point. Jeremiah Smith is so big and so strong that then he makes the cut to go to the outside. The momentum of Jeremiah Smith running into the DB at 5 yards when he went up to check Jeremiah Smith is what pushed the DB back. So how you can make that call in that situation, I don't understand. Like, I've seen a whole bunch of people talk about it. College football officiating, especially with now how big college football is, I would argue it's probably, we talk about this, maybe the second largest sport besides the NFL, right? It's probably there's probably more money and more attention on college football than any other professional sport besides the NFL. So if you are going to have that big of an audience and there's that much at stake every week in college football, you need to have some accountability when it comes to referees, right? Like, there is way too much gray area with these guys that you're getting a different crew each and every week that has different beliefs and they ref the games differently. Like, they have to do something about refereeing in college football. You just have to. There is so much inconsistency.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's embarrassing. It happens all the time. It shouldn't, because as you said, they have, Big Ten has a $1 billion television deal. There's a lot of money here, probably enough to go around and get some full-time officials involved. But nothing's going to change that. They're not going to overturn the outcome or let Ohio State have a mulligan for that final drive, which ended with, so the penalty moves them back 15 yards, knocks them out of field goal range, puts them in second, third, and long. Will Howard tries to make a play to get that yardage back, 6 seconds. I thought as soon as Will Howard pulled it down and started to scramble, I said, the game's over. There's no way he can get down in time. Ohio State had the timeout, had the opportunity maybe get something going. But I don't blame him. I was talking about this with Berm on Saturday night on Snap Judgment, Zach. Like, this happened with Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, a scramble. Like, I sort of understand that the pressure of the moment, you can't really duplicate it. I don't know that there are a ton of opportunities to. Maybe there is, but maybe you know better than me that, all right, 6 seconds, you can scramble. If the flood to the sideline is covered, you have this amount of time. Like, the clock is ticking, you're trying to get yards. I understand that might be too much to process or too much to practice. I don't really think that that would be an indictment of Will Howard's ability to lead this team, because you also, as you said earlier, he had a heck of a football game up until that point. And I would argue, like, is it the worst decision? He didn't really have another one at that point.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have another one because he knows they have to get yards. Like, they're not in field goal range at that point. So you're like, we need to do something. I don't blame him at all. I mean, things are moving so fast in that situation. It's so hard. He can't look at the clock plus look at everything else. Like, come on. The game is happening so fast at that standpoint. I don't blame him. I'm the same way with you, though. As soon as he tucked the football and started running, I'm like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. The game's over. Time's out. Now, on the flip side, I've seen some pictures, and who knows, pictures always pictures can always show something different than actually happens, right? And I've seen some pictures out there with him sliding, giving himself up with 1 second left on the clock. Do I think they probably should have reviewed it just to take a look at it? Yes. And would I have been okay if they would have said, hey, after review, play on the field stands or wasn't enough to overturn? Yes, I would have been okay with that. So who knows, right? At the end of the day. But at the same time, it's Will Howard's like, we need to get 5 to 10 yards here. There's 6 seconds left. Yes, we have a timeout. Well, in that situation, he might think, hey, listen, only 3 seconds have went off the clock. But in all reality, because everything's moving so fast, 6 seconds are gone. I don't blame him at all. You cannot blame him. I think he almost technically played a flawless game from his standpoint. I mean, he did a lot of great things.
He said afterwards, he certainly gave credit to Oregon and put the loss on a team loss, but he said that their designs are on seeing Oregon again. They would like to put themselves in position to get a rematch in the Big Ten championship game. That is certainly on the table for the Buckeyes. If they, in 2 weeks go out and handle Nebraska, which you would think that they should do without a lot of sweat, then that Penn State game becomes a huge deal. Mm-hmm. Indiana down the stretch playing some much better football this season. And then, of course, what's waiting in the last week of the regular season. If Ohio State handles the second half of the year and goes 6-0 in those games, they will most likely be in position to play Oregon again. How do you think that this team is going to respond with this off date coming and with this loss sitting with them, Zach?
This bye week could have been the best bye week, or it could be the worst bye week, yeah. Right? You go out and win that game, it's the best bye week because you win a massive game, you're able to recover, mentally you're able to relax a little bit to finish the last 6 games of the year. Now, you go out there, you lose, and I would say this bye week's probably at the worst time for this team because when you lose a game like that, and especially getting outplayed the way you did, I think from that standpoint, you want to get back on the field as quickly as possible, right? You want to change your attention from what just happened to now let's focus on the next opponent. And now with an off week, there's really no focusing on the next opponent because you're not jumping into Nebraska's film this week. Maybe you are towards the end of the week, right? But you do a lot of self-scouting on bye week. So now guess what? They're going to be showing a lot of that Oregon game because you obviously are going to take that game to heart and you're going to say, hey, how do we get better, especially with the plans of and the goals of meeting them again in Indy in 7 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now, whatever it is. So it's tough. I think as an Ohio State team, this is going to be a tough week because you are sitting in kind of the salt in your wound, so to speak, from that game. And yeah, man, it's tough. I thought Saturday night after the game, and I thought about it again Sunday morning, and I'm like, how would I respond to that? Like being a captain on this team and you lose a game like that going into a bye week, like how do you respond? And it's tough because so much of college football, Ryan Day talks about this. You have to move on to the next week, right? What happened, happened. You have to move on. It's just really tough to move on from a game like that when the stakes were that high, when you guys or when we have been playing as good as we have been, and when you have the goals that you have, right? Like now there's no margin for error. And you and I have talked about this. Like you have to be perfect here on out. And you've got 4 really good football teams in your last 6 games that you're going to be up against with Nebraska, Penn State, Indiana, and Michigan, right? 3 of the 4 you play at home, which is a great thing, but there is no margin for error. You have to be on top of it. You have to go out and win football games. That game in Happy Valley, now maybe if they would have won this game, they would have been playing a little bit looser. What happens is now you go into State College against Penn State November 2nd, and you're a little bit more tight because guess what? You know you have to win that football game, which makes you ramp everything up, which then guess what? Every play is like 2. Every yard is like 2, right? Like now you have to go in there knowing we have to win this football game, and it's a really hard place to play.
Sure is. And so was Autzen Stadium on Saturday night. Ohio State 1 point short, 1 play short, 1 call short, 1 loss is what the end result was there. So we'll keep talking about what happened there because it is an off date. The season has changed. It is a different course now, a different championship path for the Buckeyes. Can still get there, and we'll be talking about how they can. We'll be back with Zach Boren later in the week for some Buckeye Q. I have a feeling we'll be looking at 3rd and long situations if I had to place a wager on that. But we'll have podcast dailies all week. Looking at, just where the Buckeyes are at the midway point of this year before then turning the page next week to Ohio State, Nebraska. But thanks for joining us for a Boren Blitz on a Monday morning. He is Zach Boren. I am Austin Ward. We'll see you next time.